In late summer of 1991, in a quiet part of Prince George's County in Maryland, a young woman vanished from her home, never to be seen again. What made her disappearance unlike any other was what she said to her therapist in the weeks prior: that something had been watching her. No one believed her. Not the police. Not even her family. What began with a missing person would lead her therapist to question reality and eventually come face to face with darkness. A darkness that she could not fathom. Dr. Elaine Mercer was a clinical psychologist. With over 2 decades as a psychologist, she had spent the past 9 years running a small private practice from her home office in Laurel, Maryland. She had recently taken on a new patient, Claire Henson. Her notes from that summer described Claire as a 27-year-old art teacher who worked at a local elementary school. She had no history of mental disorders. Claire was in therapy for severe anxiety attacks following a recent accident. Her first few sessions were routine. The following sessions, however, were not. That's when Claire first mentioned something that would later haunt her therapist. Dr. Mercer's notes read. She said she felt watched. Mercer later wrote, not by a person, but by something. Something that stood just within the shadows of the trees behind her house. Something that she said could not possibly be real. Dr. Mercer simply dismissed it as a manifestation. Her mind giving shape to her anxiety. The doctor prescribed medication to help her with the symptoms she was experiencing and sent her home. However, in the following sessions, Claire continued giving more and more details of this strange figure. She said the figure stood perfectly still between the trees, that its eyes caught the light like glass, and once, she claimed, it stepped into the light, enough for her to see coarse fur along its arms and a face that was neither human nor animal. Fearing her patient was having a psychotic break, Dr. Mercer considered having Claire committed for evaluation. She would later decide against that course of action and continue with the weekly sessions. Over the next couple of weeks, Claire's behavior changed. There were obvious signs she had not been sleeping, and the drugs prescribed were clearly not countering the hallucinations. If anything, she seemed to be getting worse. More of Claire's strange behavior changes would come to light. Her co-workers said she began leaving work early and stopped socializing altogether. Neighbors recalled she would have her TV on late at night, she kept her curtains drawn, and avoided the woods entirely. John Henson, Claire's father, told police later on she had called him late one night, insisting something was outside her bedroom window. He said he drove over, looked around the house for several minutes, checked all the windows in the house, and even walked over to the tree line. There were no signs of anything out of the ordinary. In Dr. Mercer's later sessions, she noted that Claire's drawings began to shift from colorful expressive art to something darker, distorted faces, animal skulls, and horned silhouettes. The therapist also noted continued paranoia and recurring vivid nightmares with, as Claire described, the sound of animal hooves on pavement. Coming towards her. Claire Henson would miss her next appointment. On August 22, 1991, Claire Henson's father reported her missing after she had not responded to repeated calls from him. She had also not gone to work that morning. Police officers found her front door unlocked. Her car was still in the driveway. Inside her home, signs of her unfinished routine. Dishes in the sink, clean laundry dumped on the couch, and her shoes, likely the ones worn the day before, left by the door. On the kitchen counter were her sketchbook, house keys, and favorite Polaroid camera. All left behind. According to her father, she never went anywhere without them. At the back of the house, officers noted flattened grass leading to the tree line, but there were no footprints beyond it. The initial police theory was that Claire must have simply wandered into the woods or had gone on a stroll and had gotten lost. A search team consisting of police officers and concerned citizens was formed. Days after she went missing, the search for Claire Henson was called off. Her father would later say the silence in that house never felt right again. When Dr. Mercer heard the news of Claire's disappearance, she immediately felt guilt. She had dismissed Claire's fears as imagination. After so many years, how could she have made such an error? Were the signs there all along? Why did she so easily dismiss them? This guilt would later turn into an obsession. In an attempt to right her wrongs, she began re-listening to the tapes of Claire's time with her. On the tape of her last session, Claire had mentioned hearing strange sounds. After it had happened again, she had recorded it. That tape was now in police custody. Dr. Mercer needed to hear the tape, but knew Detective Harlan, who was in charge of the investigation, would never release the tape to her. The tape supposedly contained something unusual. In that session, Claire described hearing slow, heavy breathing. The microphone had picked up a faint, low sound just outside her bedroom window. She said it was as if there was someone, or something, out there. Someone Claire never saw. Forensics technicians later analyzed the tape and couldn't identify the origin of those sounds. Elaine started her own quiet investigation. She visited Claire's home, spoke to neighbors, and learned of at least 2 earlier incidents no one had thought to connect to Claire. A dog found mutilated near the power line trails with strange claw marks, and a teen who vanished some years before after telling friends he'd seen something with horns near the same woods. In that case, police believed he left town and would turn up, eventually. At first, suspicion turned toward a reclusive neighbor, Calvin Weller, a 58-year-old widower living a few houses down from Claire. He mostly kept to himself and was known to hunt in those same woods. Police had interviewed him twice. He denied any involvement, producing receipts showing he was in Annapolis the night Claire disappeared. Still, neighbors whispered. When Dr. Mercer went to go see him, she noted his strange reaction. Not to Claire, but to the circumstances around her going missing. A visible flinch, followed by silence. Like he had wanted to say something but decided not to. Only later, reviewing local archives, did she learn Weller's wife had gone missing in 1978, around the same time. This was also when the rumors of sightings of a strange figure began to grow. A figure described as half-man, half-goat with horns on its head. The first couple of sightings were reported near Governor's Bridge Road. At the time, Weller had mentioned his wife telling him she had seen a horned figure watching from the woods. However, nobody believed that version of events. Back then, Calvin Weller was the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance. The case was never solved. To Elaine Mercer, these coincidences started feeling more like a pattern. What was this figure? What did it have to do with Claire's disappearance? Had all victims actually seen the same thing before they went missing? And why were the police not interested in it? Elaine Mercer knew she had to dig deeper. Dr. Mercer eventually reached out to an old friend, a retired police officer. With his help, she gained access to unsolved case files as far back as the late 60s and 70s. In them, she found a few more disappearances within a 30-mile radius of Claire's house, including Roberta Weller, Calvin Weller's wife. All locals born in the area, all near wooded areas bordering the Patuxent River. In one report, an officer described hearing a strange animal noise, like a grunt, echoing through the trees during a nighttime search. In another case file, another officer described an animal-like odor lingering in the air. The source of that odor was never found. According to the interviews she conducted with some of the older townsfolk, a few people claimed to have seen glimpses of the strange figure before. Never a clear sighting. Sometimes out of the corner of their eye. Just out of view. No one had ever been able to prove its existence. These were the earliest accounts she could find about what locals had long whispered. Some believed it was a creature born from an experiment gone wrong, a man fused with a goat at a nearby agricultural research facility. But others said it was older than that. A spirit that took form through fear itself. There was one interview she highlighted in her notes. In it, the person mentioned the possible existence of an old ritual site somewhere near the Governor's Bridge. It was believed the old tribes that first roamed these parts held rites there. Offerings to something that watched from the woods. No evidence of this location has ever been discovered. The more Dr. Mercer researched, the more she began to believe it. There really was something out there. The guilt of not believing Claire weighed heavily on her. She would continue her search for Claire. By mid-October, Dr. Mercer's colleagues noticed changes in her behavior. She was no longer seeing her longtime patients regularly. She referred a lot of them to new therapists. She also canceled her teaching schedule and began spending evenings driving the rural roads around Bowie and Laurel. Her journals from that period described dreams of branches shaped like antlers and waking to sounds of hooves on the pavement outside her home. She described shadows shifting. as if something just within the darkness was trying to grab her. Neighbors reported seeing her standing in her yard at night, shining a flashlight toward the woods. Then, on October 28th, she recorded an audio entry that was never meant for anyone else to hear. "I've seen it. Not fully, but enough to know she wasn't lying. It moves differently. It doesn't walk. It glides between the trees." She never gave that tape to police. It was found later among her personal effects. It's believed that on the evening of November 3rd, Dr. Mercer got in her car and drove towards Governor Bridge Road, a few miles from where Claire had lived. Inside were her wallet, her notes, and an unfinished letter addressed to Detective Harlan. Her keys were still in the ignition. Near the rear of the car, laying on the ground, police found a small microcassette recorder. The tape inside contained only 37 seconds of audio. Footsteps on gravel, rustling leaves, and a sudden unidentified sound, followed by a woman's voice whispering, "It's right there." At dawn the following day, her car was found. Abandoned. She disappeared that day. Elaine Mercer was never seen again. When investigators examined Dr. Mercer's car, they found a camera on the passenger seat, the same model Claire had owned. Beside it lay a single Polaroid photograph. The image was grainy and blurred. It showed an unknown location in the woods. The photograph, taken at an awkward angle. At first glance, it was clear there was something unusual. When the photo was examined closely, a figure began to emerge, tall, upright. Its shape was distorted by light, yet you could just make out what looked like curved horns and a long, angular face turned toward the lens. Dr. Mercer had been there. She had seen something and captured it. Whether she found the creature, or it found her, no one can say for sure. What investigators know for sure is she saw something in those woods. The photo was entered into evidence, sealed in an envelope and filed away. It remains there to this day. One image, one unanswered question. What did she see in those woods? After that night, neither Claire Henson nor Dr. Elaine Mercer were ever seen again. 3 years later, in the spring of 1994, a group of kids playing near Governor Bridge stumbled upon what looked like a shallow grave beneath the roots of an old oak tree. When police arrived, they uncovered several animal bones, and what was believed to be part of a human femur. The discovery made headlines for a week before quietly fading from the news. The bones were too old to be any of the more recent missing persons. DNA testing was inconclusive. Degradation made identification impossible. The remains were sealed in evidence storage, never publicly linked to either woman. But for many in Prince George's County, the story had already changed. Local folklore absorbed both disappearances into something larger, something older. Teenagers began daring each other to visit the woods after dark, leaving offerings of cans along the trails. Rumors of sightings continued, scary growls in the woods, eyes reflecting the light, a figure on 2 legs crossing the road just beyond the car headlights. In 1998, during a late-night Halloween radio show in Bowie, an anonymous caller phoned in. The voice, trembling, claimed to be someone who'd seen the Goatman and lived. Before the line went silent, the caller said 2 names, Claire and Elaine. Then the line went dead. The caller was never identified. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. The recordings from Dr. Mercer's office were archived. Until recently, they were never made public. Today, the legend of the Goatman remains alive, somewhere between folklore and forgotten truth. Whether it was a predator, a man, or something else entirely, no one can say for certain. But the woods along the Patuxent River still hold their silence. Every few years, hikers report strange tracks on those trails, cloven but deep enough to suggest something heavy, something walking upright. Some call it coincidence. Others say the Goatman still watches those who try to understand him. And as one detective later said, the worst part wasn't what we found in those woods. It's what we didn't find. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.